This lesson covers some issues with statistics, so we're going to talk about measures of central tendencies, specifically mean, median, mode, and range. First, when you are given a set of data values or numbers, statisticians, and even me, a teacher, need to know how to calculate the mean, median, and mode of the group. The purpose is to find either what value recurs the most, like which one happens the most often, and which is the approximate value of the whole data set, and what is the range of the values. So when you're thinking about mean, median, and mode, I think the best thing for you is to think of it in terms of your class and your class average and the grades that you get in classes, because that's how I, as a teacher, need to calculate your grades by the end of the terms in the year. Central tendency means that we're looking for one central value that can generally describe the whole situation or all of the marks. Before we go on, just a very helpful hint, you're about to learn about mean, median, mode, and range. I would like you to keep in mind that to find or calculate any of these things, your data, your numbers, should be in order from smallest value to the greatest value. First, we'll talk about mode. Mode is a measure indicating the center of concentration in a distribution. The mode is the value or category that has the highest frequency, which in other words means the value that shows up the most often or has the most answers. That's your mode. So for example, here is a set of data, and you'll notice that the 6 shows up very, very often. So therefore, 6 is your mode. It is possible, though, that set of values don't have a number that shows up the most, meaning like you have 2 numbers that show up twice or every number shows up once. We say that there is no mode or that the mode is 0. The median is a measure indicating the center of position in a distribution. Basically, it's the number in the middle of the data, again, organized from smallest to biggest. If there is an odd number of data, the median is straight in the center, right in the middle. But if there's an even number of data, the median is actually found between 2 data points, and so we find the average of the two. So here's an example. I have an even number of data, so I don't really have one exact middle number. I have 2 in the middle, 5 and 6. So what you need to do is find the average. So you do 5 plus 6 divided by 2, which is 5.5. So the median is actually 5.5, which makes sense because it's halfway between 5 and 6. The mean is a measure indicating the equilibrium center of a distribution, and it is also known as the average. When you find the average, you have the sum of all the values divided by all the number of data or values that you're given. So for example, here's the same set of data that I gave you. You're going to add them all up, and then you're going to divide it by the total number of data. So there's 12 set of data, so you do 59 divided by 12, and the average of this is 4.92. So again, average is like approximately like what is the middle value? What did everybody get on average? On average, you could say everybody got 4.92. Next, we're going to talk about weighted mean. Now, a weighted mean is kind of what I use as a teacher when I do your grades. For example, when you get a 70 on a test, that doesn't mean that you get a 70 in the term. I weight them differently, and that's what we're going to show you how to do right now. When you calculate marks, you will not have a mean, but instead a weighted mean. This means that each of the marks is worth something different. So here's an example. I have a geography course here that's divided into 3 terms, okay? Taking into account the grade each student receives each term and how much each term is worth. So say, for example, you got 75 in term 1, but it's actually worth 20%. And you got a 72 in term 2, but it's only worth 30%. And in term 3, you got an 88%, and it's worth 50% of your whole term. So when we find the total average, you have to do the grade times how much it's weighted. And you'll see here that I do it in decimal form. So you would do 0.75 times the weighting, so 0.20, plus 0.72 times the weighting, 0.3, and 0.88 times the weighting, 0.5. So the final total average of this student at the end of the year will be 80.6%. Range is a measure indicating how spread out or concentrated data is. To calculate the range, you subtract the highest value of your data set from the lowest value of the data set, and remember, your data is always going to be in order from smallest to biggest. If it's not, you need to rearrange it in order from smallest to biggest. So here is the last data values that I gave you in the last slides. If you want to find the range, you do low and high, and you subtract them. So the range is 8 minus 2, which is 6. So just to recap your measures of central tendency, you have mode, that's the number that occurs the most. You have the median, that is the number in the middle of all data values. If it's an even number of data, you have to find the average of the 2 middle numbers. The mean is also known as the average. You add up all the values and you divide it by the total number of values. The weighted mean is what we use when we do tests and terms, because when you multiply the averages by how much they're worth or weighted, and then you add them all together. And remember that I converted my percents into decimal. And finally, the range is the difference between the highest and the lowest data point, so high minus low. And remember, always your data is from small to big. When data is distributed into classes, so here's an example of when data is distributed into classes. So you'll see that instead of having like the height of dogs like 12, somebody has 20 once, somebody has 20 another time, and so on. So what I did here is I've separated them into intervals. So between 20 and 40 centimeters, there's 18 dogs. And between 40 and 60 centimeters, there's 19 dogs, and all the way to 120. And my total of dogs is 80. How do you calculate things like mean, median, mode, and range when you're given something like this? Well, if you have the mode, it's the class with the highest frequency. We call this the modal class. So you'll notice here that the class with the highest frequency has 20 and it's 80 to 100. The midpoint or middle of the modal class gives us an estimate of what the mode is. So you'll see that this class here is 80 to 100. The middle between 80 and 100 is about 90. So we can estimate that the mode is the number 90, or the height 90 centimeters. What about the median? The class that includes the median is called the median class. The midpoint of the median class gives us an estimate of the value of the median. The middle of 20 to 120 is approximately 70 centimeters, so the median class is therefore the class 60 to 80. Now the mean. To calculate the mean of the classes, you need to multiply the midpoints of each class here by their frequency here, and then add them together. Then you divide it by the total. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the midpoints of each of my rows here, each of my intervals. So the midpoint from 20 to 40 is 30, the midpoint from 40 to 60 is 50, the midpoint from 60 to 80 is 70, the midpoint from 80 to 100 is 90, and the midpoint from 100 to 120 is 110. So I take each of these midpoints and I divide it by their respective frequencies, and then I divide it by the total frequency, which is 80. And I get that approximately the average of the heights is 66.25 centimeters. Finally, the range. In classes, the range is the difference between the upper bound of the highest class and the lower bound of the lowest class. Here's the lowest class, and the lower bound is 20. Here's the highest class, and the higher bound is 120. So I'm going to do 120 minus 20, and so my range is 100 centimeters. Now we're going to talk about a different type of table. We're going to call this a table of condensed data. So you'll see here that I give you a table called families. So I want to know how many families or how many people out of 55 people have the number of children here. So 7 people have 1 children, 16 people have 2 children, 12 people have 3 children, 11 people have 4 children, 8 have 5 children, and 1 has 6 children, for a total of 55 people or family that I have asked. So there are no classes here. So how do we find mean, median, mode, and range of this type of table? The mode is the same thing. It's the one that contains the highest frequency, but instead of giving you an interval, I give you a number. So the mode is 2 children, because it contains the most frequency. So the most of the people that I asked had 2 children. Next is the median. If there are 55 families, say, that I've asked, if I divide it by 2, it's 27.5. So I'm just going to round up and say that 28 is the data point where the median is. So here we have 7 data points. Here we have 16 data points. So there's like 7 ones, 16 twos, 12 threes, 11 fours, 8 fives, and 1 6, okay? That's what frequency means. Like, how often do I see the number 1? How often do I see the number 2? How often do I see the number 3, etc., etc.? Now, I need to know where is the 25th data point. So what I need to calculate is, okay, 7, it's definitely not in here because I only have 7 data points here. 7 plus 16 is 23, so I still haven't hit the 28th data point, which means that the 28th data point has to be in this row here. Okay, so in this row, the number of children is 3. So we can assume that the middle value, or the middle number, the median, is 3. the mean. First, multiply the number of children column by its frequency. Now, sometimes it's not going to be number of children column, it's going to be something else, but you multiply this column by the frequency column, you add them together, and then you divide by the total frequency. So we're going to do 1 times 7 plus 2 times 16 plus 3 times 12 plus 4 times 11 plus 5 times 8 plus 6 times 1, all over 55. And on average, there are 3 children. Finally, the range. The difference between the highest data, not frequency, and lowest data. So here we have children from 1 to 6, so we do 6 minus 1, which is 5. And that is the end of measures of central tendency.